Well, welcome to the Transformational Podcast. I'm Chris. I'm the pastor in Paradise. I'm one of your hosts. The other one is my brother. He's the Marine over there in Maryland, Robert. And we're so glad you're with us. And man, the reason we call this the Transformational Podcast is really it's because we're just talking about the way our everyday walk with God and time in His Word affects the way we live and our thoughts and how we interact with His Word. And so it's not just a chore or a task that we do where we just read it to check a religious box. Man, we're just saying, God, will you speak to us on a daily basis through your Word? So we just like to get together and talk about what God's teaching us. Now, before we jump into talking about that, Robert,
it's good to be here.
What's going on in your world? Any life updates? Any ups, downs, whatever?
As you would imagine, in this role, it is never dull. It's never quiet. And in fact, this week we just got back off travel yesterday. I didn't realize, honestly, Chris, I didn't realize that I'd had 15 hours of sleep in 3 days until I was on the plane back yesterday. And I was like, oh man, I feel really tired. And then it hit me. I was sleeping like 5 hours a night. And typically, Chris, it's because when I'm traveling and I'm managing the day, which is kind of my job, I'm not as I don't have as much time or availability to hit all the emails and get all the returns and the replies. And in my job, it's not an option just to get to it tomorrow. That's not how it really works. And so, I work and then I realize, oh man, I'm really tired and it's late and I got to wake up the next morning. And Chris, I think, we've talked about this on the podcast, but I deeply enjoy my time in the morning with the Lord.
Yeah.
I deeply enjoy my time to get a run in because I feel like what I studied before I go running is what then allows time to bake it in as I'm running, kind of settles in. And so anyway, this week, like I said, we've been up in kind of in the New England area, very, very beautiful area. I got to watch the sun come up on Tuesday off the eastern shores. It was really amazing, very picturesque there in Newport, Rhode Island, and then popped over to Hartford, Connecticut and ran a route, Chris, that I had forgot I'd even run like 3 years ago. I'd stayed in this same hotel, not even just, it's one of those random chances where we stayed in the same spot and got to run a route again. And it was really nice to get back out there. Now, last time I ran it, it was covered in snow and very slippery, but it was nice and warm this week. And you might get to see a lightning flash or two behind me at some point tonight because we got some thunderstorms moving through. Cool. But you know what I get to do tomorrow? This is actually what I'm really excited about, Chris.
What's that?
My roommate, friend of, my roommate, Jeremy, is getting promoted tomorrow. He's getting promoted to Navy captain. And my other roommate, John, is a Navy captain. And by tomorrow at 9:15.
Now pause. You said roommate.
Oh, roommate in college. Okay, so these are my college roommates, which is pretty cool because all three of us are still in the Marine or still in the Navy, the Department of the Navy. For me, the Marine Corps, for like 22 years, and we'll have all made 06, which is colonel for the Marines and captain for the Navy. And so it's going to be pretty cool to preside over it. I'm going to be the speaker for his promotion. I don't know if it's because he listens to the podcast or if he just needs somebody with a very loud Marine voice, because we're going to be outside at one of the war memorials doing it. It's going to be really cool. I can't wait.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's going on here.
Now that was John Gandy?
No, this is Jeremy Cristetto. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And John's going to be there. He actually was there today. I hung out with him the day while I was trying to get my actual job done. So that's tomorrow. I'm really excited. That will be kind of all three of us, which is funny, Chris, because all three of us were pretty sure, by the way, we're all three Christ followers, and we all three love the Lord deeply, and it shows in all three of our lives, even to today. And even as I was talking to John today, and he was just sharing. It was like normal talk, Chris, talk of like what God's doing in his life, not like awkward, but like, hey, this is what God's doing in my life. And same thing with Jeremy. Anytime I go over, it's just fun to talk to him and see how the Lord's working.
Robert,
and so get to do that tomorrow.
I love that you're saying that. I love that you're having conversation, because I think for some people they need to hear that that's okay. You're right? In the Marine. You're a Marine. You're in the military. It is totally good and should be a part as we're following Jesus of our daily lives,
For sure.
to just talk about and feel good about talking about, a relationship with God and what's going on with that. I know people who do it, and I know people who aren't sure if they can do it. And I just want to encourage those people who you totally can.
Well, Chris, we're going to talk about it a little bit tonight
Okay, cool.
as we get into what we're talking about. But before we jump into that, what's going on in your world? Any quick catch-ups here?
Well, I'm going to tell on myself.
Uh-oh. Go.
Well, first of all, things are rocking and rolling. Things are going great. Grateful for what God's doing in our church. Had another big Sunday this past Sunday. Lots of people, first time people come to church. Had a men's event last Sunday night that was incredible.
Awesome.
It was just, it's exciting. I love hearing men raise their voice praising God.
Absolutely. I know, right?
I just feel as if God loves it too, because that's what he created us to do, to lead the way.
Yeah. And so, the fact is, the elf was not wrong. He just had it a little bit off topic, right? The best way to spread Christmas cheer, singing loud for all to hear. Well, the best way to worship the Lord is singing loud for all to hear. And I always like to think of what David said, and what he really said is, "I'll become even more undignified than this."
Oh, yeah.
And you go into the Psalms, it talks about how David says, "I've seen your power, and I've beheld your power and your glory. I've seen you in the temple." He says, "And because of this, I will raise my hands in worship." And so that's where I just get fired up. I love to worship. I don't know if I've got call it a stage voice, but I don't really care.
Hey, it doesn't matter.
It
doesn't matter. God's not looking for a stage voice. He's looking for a heart, pure heart. So anyway, it was an incredible night. But this past week, I had to put my truck in the shop. Okay.
Why did you put your truck in the shop, Chris? Well, I feel like this is what we're about to tell ourselves. Why did you put your truck in the shop?
Because the other morning I get up and I start pulling out of the drive, and there's something feels like it's shuddering a little bit as I'm turning the corner. I'm like, what in the world? Now, I didn't pay attention to the fact that I just thought it was something in the steering, because it was when I was turning hard. That's all I could think about.
Okay.
Well, that evening, a friend of mine, my assistant's husband, he's very smart with stuff. And so I'm like, can I swing by the house? Let's look at it. I'm supposed to go on a trip this weekend. So go over to his house, and we start to back out. He's like, can you hear it better with the windows down or windows up? I was like, you know what? I didn't think about lowering the windows. Should have. So I lowered the windows, and as soon as I start backing up, all of a sudden I can hear that it's not the front, it's the back.
Okay.
And there's something it's like the rear diff is locked. And so something's wrong with the rear differential.
Yeah.
And so
for those who aren't very smart on differentials, the rear differentials, the technology behind that is really simple. If you turn a corner, the inner wheel goes shorter distance than the outer wheel. So if they're not allowed to spin independently in that turn, then they end up actually one skids while one skids forward while one drags backwards. So it actually is really bad for your truck. Anyway, go ahead.
So I had the problem, and so I took it to the shop. And really, Robert, I kind of knew things were bad, because about 4 months ago, I heard a rattle. And Julie heard a rattle, but
not like rattle.
No, not like that. Right. But the issue was it wasn't consistent. So it would rattle sometimes, and it wouldn't rattle other times.
So you decided to just make, hey, that'll buff. We're just going to keep driving until it fails.
Again,
no need to get it looked at.
I thought it might have been the skid plate. I thought it might have been something that just had rattled, but it would settle in from time to time.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't consistent. It wasn't, and I just thought if it was actual an issue, it would do it consistently.
Okay.
Turns out there was a bearing going bad, and had I addressed the issue when the bearing was going bad, we could replace the bearing at a fraction of the cost of what I'm about to repair the entire differential for, because I didn't pay attention to it. Now, here's the life lesson.
Yeah.
When in doubt, check it out. All right. There you go. Listen, you don't have to wait. Listen, I think this could preach too, because when you start,
I know we're not going there tonight, but we could go there.
No, when you start sensing there's something not right, it's time to go and ask the Lord to figure it out and say, Lord, search me, help me understand what's going on. and don't let it go. Don't
Yeah, I
let it
love
go
it.
to a place where it blows up on you. So anyway, my truck's in the shop, and anyway, it is what it is. The Lord will provide. I was frustrated with myself, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
happens.
Well, I was thinking tonight, if it's okay, we'll do a little bit of a role reversal where you can kind of do the questions. Only because I'm bringing something tonight that I know you're kind of already studying, but Chris, it came up in my reading this week, and it's a little bit of a leadership lesson. And I've been thinking a lot about leadership lately because I'm getting ready to step into a new role in the next month or so. And this chapter in the Bible, it's chapter of Nehemiah, the book, I should say, not chapter, was just kind of timely. And some of the stuff that
Mm-hmm.
I read there, I'd like to share some observations, if you don't mind.
Yeah, man, I love to hear what guys have been teaching. I think this is great because I'm of the mindset we get to study the greatest leader of all time, is
Yeah.
Jesus, but he
Mm-hmm.
also has given us a manual with so many leaders in it. The
Right.
Bible has so many leaders in it, and who he used to lead nations, to lead armies, and so I love the character we're going to look at tonight that God kind of spoke to you through. And so,
Yeah.
man, I just want to hear, kind of take me where you were this week. Kind of show me what God's been showing you.
Well, okay, I want to talk about Nehemiah for a second first, because I think this is important. And I'm going to kind of summarize the first chapter or two, but I got to put my glasses on just to get the piece of it. He gets a report from a friend of his that has come back. Now, the Jews have, for the most part, have gone back to Jerusalem. And but he gets a report, and he's like, "Hey, how are things going?" For those who survived the exile. And he said, "Hey, the wall of Jerusalem's broken down and its gates have been burned with fire." And upon hearing this, he fasts and prays. And we could go into that part of it, the fact that, his first action there was to seek the Lord, but that's not actually that's not where I want to focus in on tonight. Although the fact is like when you're in a leadership situation, that's where you should start. Anyway, he goes before the King Artaxerxes, and when you go before the king, you're not allowed to look sad. You're not allowed to look, anything but happy. Well, he goes before him and he doesn't look like his normal self. And king notices,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, "Hey, is there something wrong?" And now, Nehemiah is worried because that's a good way to get yourself killed.
Right.
And
Now, Robert,
go,
he was a cupbearer for the king, right?
yep,
And
yep,
so what that means is that he tasted wine for a living, not to see if it was good, just to make sure it wasn't poison. So,
yep.
man, people were dying to get out of his job. But
I see what you did there. I see what it is there. Anyway, when he asked him about it, he was ready with an answer. He says, "Hey, why shouldn't I look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins? Its gates have just been destroyed by fire." That's in chapter 2, verse 3. And the king says, "What is it that you want?" Now, it's kind of funny. I like this. By the way, it still has nothing to do with where I want to go tonight. It's just how much I love the word of God. It's how much it's real. It's just so real. Like I identify with him at this very moment because the king says, "What is it that you want?" And this is what the Bible reads. It says, "Then I prayed to the God of heaven." So Nehemiah's like,
yikes!
yikes. Yeah, shoots that God help me, a
Yeah,
little flare prayer up.
been
Um,
there.
but but he was ready with an answer, right?
Right.
He was ready with an answer. He knew what he wanted, he knew what he needed, and he was ready with the ask. Like, "Hey, this is what it is." Now that is
Mm-hmm.
because he had already thought about it, he had prayed about it, and he was simply awaiting the opportunity. But
Yeah.
that's not really where I want to start. Where I want to start is, if we could, is Nehemiah 2:11, and in Nehemiah 2:11, he finally gets to Jerusalem, and it says, "I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, it says I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding." And another version, it says donkeys, because that's kind of what they rode at the time. Um, by night, I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal wall. Anyway, it goes and basically says he inspects the entire thing, bunch of different verses there. And then it finishes in 16 saying the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because I had as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles and what he was doing there. And so it's funny. The first thing he does, Chris, is he gathers a small group of people. It's only like 2 or 3 people. And he goes out and he inspects what's going on. He observes. He gets a firsthand account of how broken down the wall is. He's heard it, and now he's seen it. And my observation here is that, sometimes when we have something that's broken as leaders, our first kind of instinct is to crash the situation with a lot of people.
Right.
As opposed to say, you know what, let me give 1 or 2 confidants, 1 or 2 people who aren't going to go blabbing around and telling everybody what's going on. And we're just going to take a quick, let's observe what's there. Let's stop. Let's take a minute and let's actually capture the state of the actual wall itself. And so that's what he did. And I was thinking about that for my own self, is like, okay, how many times have I rushed in, or how many times have I brought too many people, frankly,
right,
in on the problem, as opposed to saying, okay, let me get my vision together first. Let me get my thoughts together first, because here's the problem, Chris, and this is like the leadership moment here that I learned here. Yeah. Until he is clear about the problem, until Nehemiah is clear about the problem, or better yet, until you are clear about the problem, it will be impossible to tell someone else what the problem is.
Right.
You will not be able to do that. And so that's one of the things that I see there in Nehemiah 2:11.
So Robert, I just for the sake of maybe saying what you just said, is that good vision starts with understanding the starting condition.
Oh man,
you can't have a good vision if you don't understand the condition, where you're starting from. You got to, if you're going to go on a journey, you can't choose your destination and your path without first understanding, well, where am I starting? If you're going to be able to get from here to there, I've got to know where here is first.
Yeah.
Before I create a plan to get there. So I love that, dude. And I love that idea of not bringing too many people in. Will you kind of explain what your thought is on that?
Well, so it's interesting. It's practically exercised in the military a lot more than people realize, in that in a lot of situations, senior leaders will have 1 or 2 other senior leaders that are around them, and they'll conference. Now, they won't call in every leader in their organization. They'll call in the 1 or 2 that they may not be equal to them, but they're just the one person that's in a supporting role. And sometimes it's a senior enlisted person. We call them sergeant majors in our service. Sometimes they may even be a master sergeant, a master gunny sergeant, but somebody senior who has some season and has actually seen a thing or two and done a thing or two. And then they bring in someone else that is maybe their kind of trusted confidant. And because what they're trying to do is not just get a good vision to start to understand, or, understand the conditions so they can have good vision. It's to make sure that they have a right view of the condition.
Yeah.
Right? Not a biased view. In other words, like, hey, am I seeing the same thing you're seeing? Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? And it's that opportunity to stop, because here's what happens next is he, basically daybreak happens and he gathers all of the officials, because nobody knew why he was there. And he pulls them all together and he says, I said to him, he goes, and I love this, Chris, because he now has a good understanding of the condition, and he's about to set the vision.
Right.
He says, then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Okay, these are people who live there, right?
Yeah.
They are well aware of what's going on, but he says it. He says, because it's important to articulate it. It's important to say what people see so that people don't think that you're like, polishing something that's not worth polishing. It says, Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. Now, okay, we've set the condition. Now let's cast that vision. Here he goes. He says, come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. And then he goes on and says, I also told them about the gracious hand of God upon me and what the king had said to me. And so he not only sets the vision sets that vision, it's that he articulates what God was doing when he actually has been pulling that vision together. And so it was really neat to me. I was thinking about, okay, as I move into whatever's next, I should probably look at it that way. Now, here's one of the things I've always said, Chris, while you're thinking about what's next is I've always asked, since somebody taught me this once, is to ask the question, what does good look like?
Yeah.
And the question is, what does good look like? And I ask that question all the time and I start there. We'll define the condition. Hey, this is the walls are broken down and the gates are burned. Okay, so what does good look like? Well, good looks like the walls are up, probably X number of feet high, X number of feet wide. Gates are set. They can be closed and shut and locked. And that's probably what good looks like, right? And so once you know what good looks like, then you're able you have to know the condition to then know what good looks like. And now you can back it in. You can back in, okay, well, what would it take? What would it take to achieve that?
Yeah,
right?
It's like you have to start with the why. Why do we need to do this? Well, why? Well, because Jerusalem lies in ruins. We're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to do this and end the disgrace. Why? So we can end the disgrace. But then he continues to give them a compelling why they should do this with him. He tells them the story of how the gracious hand of God, right? He gives them hope that this is even possible. He's going, look, God's got to be in this, right? But you got to start with why before you get to the what, because the goal of leading people, right, is that people will follow where you want to take them, right? You've got to take them on a journey, but you have to tell them why where you want to go is worth going, right? That and it's even possible. And really, here he gives them hope that it's possible by simply going, hey, here's why we need to do this, but let me tell you why I believe we can do this, right? That's motivational, man. When you start saying, this is why I believe this is possible.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, Chris. Sometimes I think people read past this. I know I've probably read past this in the past and been like, yeah, well, the why is easy. It's Jerusalem and God's for them. But that same concept, and this is that's why I said I value my time in the morning. That same concept, it applies no matter what. So for our why, and I tell every military human or civilian human that has ever worked with me, the thing that gets me up in the morning is the fact that there are lance corporals and first lieutenants, there are sailors, there are airmen, and sometimes soldiers who rely on us to do our job, execute our job of acquisition well, so they can have what they need when they need it.
Right.
And that's the why. And so I say, hey, this is what good looks like, and this is why we're doing this.
Right.
And so for him, why are we doing this? What's good look like? It's walls and gates. Why are we doing this? Because we want to be out of disgrace. And by the way, God's behind us. So they even get the benefit of having God being behind them, which I think is fantastic. You know what they said, though, when he got done?
I actually think it's great because I know how things go forward, but they go, yes, let's do it. Right.
That's
in.
right.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's start building.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they go on and they start building. We won't get into that. Now I want to get into the part that actually I ended up sharing, not just this part of the reading that morning with a 3-star general, a Marine general, no names. But I just happened to be on travel near him, and he had asked me. I went running. He saw me running that morning. I passed him coming out back in. Not ran past him like faster, but like he was.
See ya, sucker.
Yeah, I know. I started just a tad earlier in the morning than he did, and so he was going as I was coming back in on the turnaround. Anyway,
so you beat him. Basically,
I beat him. That's what I said.
You're first, you're last.
Yeah, that's right. Shake and bake. Anyway, he said, hey, you like running, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah. It's like, I'm actually really, I have this thing in the morning. I run to think, I run to listen to a podcast. I was like, I read I read the Bible every morning right before I go running. I just was like, you know what? It's just, I'm going to tell him what I do because that's what I do.
There's your Pellegrino. There it goes.
Oh man,
That's
you
why
don't even know what just happened there.
That's why we
Anyway,
can't have nice things.
yeah.
Robert's over there kung fu fighting with his Pellegrino.
Yeah, not just that. I got like, there's all kinds of things I got. Oh man, that was on my journal.
Oh no, wipe it off quick.
I know. All right. Well, that's a bummer. I'm gonna dry my journal while I keep going here. So I told him, I said, hey, I was just reading in Nehemiah this morning, and I went through the whole thing that I went with you. Nehemiah, the guy who rebuilt the wall and how he was inspirational and what he did. And I said, the couple things I learned from it this morning is, and I told the same thing that I told everybody just now, is that he went out quietly without anybody knowing. I said, but here was another part that really stuck out to me. And it's this part in, I got my Bible wet too. This is crazy. Anyway, in chapter 3, verse 5. So it's documenting who's building the wall where in chapter 3. But in chapter 3, verse 5,
Real quick, I want to point out one more thing before you get to that. Is that one of the things that I love is they say we're all in. Now notice they did not have to follow, right?
Right?
They wanted to follow. And I think that's important because, there's positional leadership, but there's also relational leadership. And sometimes positional leadership is really just management. It's authoritarian leadership, but he didn't have authority to make anybody do this.
In fact, he was barely even middle management.
Right.
Like he was under the control, under the rule of someone else, but at the same time leading these folks who didn't have to follow him.
And I think this is important because whether you have positional authority or not, and I think there's two ways of looking at it. If you don't have positional authority, understand that you still have the opportunity for leadership. Leadership up, leadership down, leadership sideways as far as the org chart goes. You can lead people through a compelling vision, starting with why. But the other thing I would say is if you're in positional leadership, if you have to tell somebody because I said so and I'm your boss, sometimes you have to. There are people that you just have to go, listen, at this point, I'm telling you, this is what we're doing. But as a leader,
that should feel a little bit like a failure, though, even though sometimes you can't do anything about it, and I get that.
Yeah.
But anytime I do that, that does feel a little bit like okay, so I missed something somewhere because I didn't give them a compelling why or a compelling vision.
And sometimes it's misalignment. At the end of the day, I'm not going to lead them where we're going because we're misaligned. They're going in a different direction, even if it's a slightly different direction. And so a misalignment will keep people from wanting to do what you're trying to give them a compelling reason to do. And that's okay. But at the end of the day, like as a leader, I want to cast a compelling vision that goes, listen, I don't want to have to tell people you have to do this. I want you to want to know.
You want to know what's funny? Your little random rabbit trail there, your little random side note.
Yeah.
Not all that random.
Oh yeah.
Here's what the Lord showed me that morning this morning. That morning. It was it goes through all of them, and then it says in verse 5, it says the next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. And then it goes on and talks about all other people. It's actually really fascinating because it says these people worked under these people, they worked under these people, and they all worked. This group of humans, it essentially records, and Nehemiah takes the opportunity to record, they built the wall, but they didn't follow anybody. They were under nobody. They chose, they didn't like the people who were leading, and they said, I'm not following you, but I'm behind building this wall. So they understood the condition, they had the vision, and they built the wall despite not wanting to follow anybody. And it made it very clear, Nehemiah, they didn't follow anybody, but they built their section of the wall. And so I was talking to this general about this, and he made the comment. He goes, so like a silo of excellence, like they just, we talk about in the military all the time, silos of excellence, and it means basically you're awesome in your tiny sphere of your tiny cylinder, but because you won't work with anybody else, then you don't accomplish the same goal or same thing like that. And I told him, I said, actually, I was like, in this case, it's different. I was like, in this case, what we see here is people are aligned to the vision, they're aligned. They understand the condition. They're aligned to the vision, and they did their part. And I was thinking, you know what Nehemiah did? He didn't care. He
Yeah.
let them do their part. He didn't try to lord over them. He didn't try to pull them in under them. He just said, hey, you know what? Yeah, they technically probably should fall under one of the foremen, but they're not going to because they don't want to, but they're building the wall. So I'm not going to make a big deal of it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to accept the help and we're going to move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
I
I
think
thought
that
about that.
that's an interesting leadership deal because, Robert, there's sometimes I think maybe we get so focused on controlling
Yep.
that we're not willing to go, wait a minute, there might be a different way to do this. And if they're still going in the same direction, and if they're not creating division, then is it okay? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. For you, I don't know how that works in the military because
Well,
at
I
the
will
end of the
tell
day,
you.
there's got to be some level of alignment. But
Yeah. Well,
I
I'll
don't
tell
know.
you, it happens a lot in the current environment I'm in because the current environment I am in is in acquisitions. And so sometimes you have a lot of people who work with you, but not for you. Okay. And
Gotcha.
so I actually once had this kind of a conversation with somebody who was in charge of the sustainment side of the house. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm in charge of the acquisition, and I technically have responsibility for the sustainment as well. But this is where these program managers and these logisticians, we always get in fights, and we're like, I'm in charge, I'm in charge, I'm in charge, and it's this fight, this battle to be in charge. And so there was a battle to be in charge with me, although I wasn't willing to play the game, because what I said to him, I said, okay. So you're in charge of logistics. I was like, what is your goals? Like, what are the things that you're measuring? What does good look like to you? And he named it out, 1, 2, and 3. And I looked at him, I go, well, those are mine too. So I think we're good. And
We're
we just
still
moved on.
see, and I think that's important for people to realize is that I think so often we get caught up on we make mountains out of molehills, right? We fight the wrong battles when you're going, wait a minute, hey, if they're still trying to, because the other thing is don't we want competent leaders on our teams?
Absolutely.
And sometimes competent leaders want to lead, and if you're just trying to make them salute and execute, you're
Yeah.
actually not getting the best version of them.
And frankly, it's a pride thing sometimes
Yeah,
because that person works for me.
yeah,
And, it does feel a little bit ugly when you see it in reverse where like they do technically work for you, but they're like, I don't work for you. And that does sometimes feel a little crummy, and maybe like like clearly their pride is coming out because that's what's happening.
yeah.
But my advice would be, and I think this is what I told the general, and it was pretty funny. He kind of like looked off and he's like, yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. Is if they're rowing in the same direction, don't kick them out of your boat. Like they're helping.
Yeah.
So let it go. So yeah, that was the one thing. And it was funny, Chris, I just want to kind of also put a pin in this aspect there is, that was just a random morning conversation with a 3-star who asked me how my run went.
Yeah, that's great.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
it's just you bring it up in conversation.
and I just told, and it was what I did. That wasn't me making stuff up. That was just that morning. And so, yeah, you got anything else? Cause I had one more.
No, keep rolling, dude.
One more thing that I really wanted to cover. And this one actually was a little bit more in line with what I was reading today. And it's kind of a highlight of 2 chapters in reality, maybe 2 or 3 chapters. So in chapter 4, it really starts talking about the opposition that Nehemiah and the Jews really start getting from the folks that are in the area. I mean, they make fun of them in chapter 4, verse 3. Tobiah, the Ammonite, starts, taunting them, and it's like, what are they building? If a fox climbed up on it, it would fall down. The wall's not that high at this point, and they're kind of making fun of it, and they're throwing shade their way. And, Nehemiah is going around saying, and the rest of the officials, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your wives, and your homes. So now he's calling them to a higher purpose because, the enemies are even threatening to attack them. And so now in the later part of chapter 4, they're actually having to build the wall while pulling watch guard with their spears and swords in hands while they're doing it. And then it kind of goes on into chapter 6, which talks a little bit more about the rebuilding. And it's kind of funny. They said, hey, they sent a messenger to Nehemiah and said, hey, we want to chat with you about what's going on. Can you come to this town? We just want to, we just want to talk. And Nehemiah is kind of like, he was like, as I had a friend once say, he goes, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. That's what Nehemiah basically says back, because he says, no, that's not going to happen. I'm not coming out to see you. And this kind of goes on and on. And then one of the things that we get to chapter 7 and verse 4. Blah, 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 blah. Is that the one that was? Did I get that right? Oh, 15. Sorry. Chapter 7 or chapter 6, verse 15. It says, so the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days.
Hey.
Sorry, go ahead.
So you said Nehemiah didn't take the bait. I just want to pause there and just say one of the things he said is to actually look at his response real quick, because I think that's important, because he basically says that I'm doing a very important work. I can't come down, right?
That's right.
I'm too busy, right? I'm too busy to come down. I can't come off the wall, right? I love that, because it's one of those deals of going, he's receiving all of this opposition and Sanballat, and they come to try to talk to him, and he says, I'm involved in a very important work. I cannot come down right now.
That's in verse 3. Chapter 6, verse 3.
Okay, I was looking for it. Sorry, I was like, where is that?
No, you're right. He said, I sent a message to them. It says, I'm carrying on a great project and cannot, I love this, and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? And they sent him that letter 4 times telling him, hey, this is what, hey, come see us. And each time he's like, why would I stop working to come to you? Like, what are you talking about? That's not happening. Of course, they wanted to kill him. That's obviously what they were doing. They're trying to get him off site to kill him.
And I just love it, because he knew what was going on, but instead of focusing on the fear of what could happen, he stayed focused on what he was there for, right? He stayed focused on what God told him to do, understanding, hey, look, they want to kill me, they want to whatever, but that's up to God. I'm doing what God wants me to do. I'm going to stay focused on what he called me to do, because really what they're trying to do is the very thing the enemy tries to do to us. What if God doesn't come through? What if you step out and you make this decision, this choice, and it doesn't work out? What if you look dumb? What if you speak up and what you felt like God was saying for you to do, that wasn't what he really wanted you to do, or whatever? The enemy will use fear to keep us from moving in faith, or to get us to stop acting in faith.
Yeah, it even says here, it says they were, in verse 9, it said they were all trying to frighten us, the people who were building, thinking their hands will get too weak for work and it will not be completed. And then the thing that, Nehemiah did, not only did he stay focused on what God called him to do, he actually prayed. He says, Lord, strengthen my hands.
Yeah.
That's what he says. He says, Lord, strengthen my hands. And he did it. He completed the thing in 52 days. And I was thinking about it, how often we can get discouraged. It's 52 days from start to finish building a wall. And this is not like any small wall. This is a big wall. Set the gates, lock the doors, the whole 9 yards in 52 days. Mm-hmm. That is an impressive feat for that wall. And it was a wall that, Chris, he could not even take his mule around in some places, because it was so in shambles. He wasn't starting with a half wall.
Right.
He was starting with no wall. Yeah. And no wall, to the point of they had to do rubble removal just to start building it. Mm-hmm. And so in that 52 days, he ended up finishing, because he stayed focused and praying to the Lord to strengthen his hands. And I think that's kind of important for us, is that when we have that opposition and we see what's going on against us, is to really stay focused on God and what God's doing in and around and through us.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it wasn't easy. And also, when you think wall, it's not like a fence that we have in our backyard, or even a foot thick of brick or whatever. We're talking. You've been to Israel. I've been to Israel.
Yeah,
this is a thick wall. This is like probably 8 foot thick. I don't know. It's huge. It's maybe
Yep.
even bigger than that. So we're talking a really thick, big wall. And without the masonry equipment that we have today, I mean, all of this was a lot of work, and even with the debris removal. Now, um, just on a side note, sometimes before God can rebuild things in our lives, we've got to get rid of the rubble first. And so that's
Yep.
just a little side note. It has nothing.
No, I like it.
Well, and honestly, I guess it could have to do with the leadership side of it as well. Because sometimes before you can build what's strong and what's true and what's good, you've got to remove some of the rubble because it is going to just get in your way from what you need to build. And so sometimes when you do your evaluation, be honest about where you're starting. It may take some, all right, hey, listen, these things have to, we're going to have to clear these things out in order to put things back in place where they need to be.
Yeah, and recognize that the opposition, it's going to come. It's going to come because of many various reasons: jealousy. Maybe they just frankly, sometimes spiritual warfare. Satan's opposing you.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's just personality. Sometimes we bring it on ourselves. I
yeah,
mean, meaning like we make bad decisions. That the important thing is to keep our eyes on Him and keep plowing, because at the end of the day, when they did it in 52 days, it says, and this is verse 16 of chapter 6, when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God.
there you go. There's the goal, right?
And Chris, here's kind of the final kind of piece of this lesson. And I'm still in it. I think right now I'd have to look where I finished, although my journal is now wet and, sad face. I'll have to dry it out later. Is that Nehemiah, when it was done, he did not go and say, look at this awesome thing that you did. Look at this awesome thing we did. And not only that, but the people around him also recognized who did it, because they were not pointing to
Yeah,
themselves. They were bringing glory to God and just simply how they lived their life. And so when people were like, wow, that's really amazing, they start to begin, if you follow God and you smell like Him, they start to really see it in your own life. And so they brought glory to Him. And I was thinking about it was funny, Chris. I was having a conversation with a pretty junior Marine about when I went to the Naval Academy about 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And I don't think I told you this story, but he asked me at the end of it, he said, how did you, I said, do you have any more questions? He said, how did you make it through the Naval Academy?
mm,
Like, what was it that helped you get through? And I looked at him and I said, now this isn't Colonel Hurst talking to you. This is just Timmy. This is just Robert just talking. I was like, Jesus is what helped me get through the Naval Academy.
yeah,
I was like, because the fact is I wasn't passing college for the first 2 years there at the Naval Academy. I finally got above a passing grade when I got past my sophomore year. It was when I had to get one. And frankly, if it was not for Jesus and His help, and even Jesus and His hand in getting me appointed to the Naval Academy, which I took that young Marine through what that was, and how that Jesus was meaningful in my getting through the Naval Academy. Um, I was walking him through that, and I was like, so, and he said, hey, well, I do these actions, like I go to church. I don't go to church anymore. And I said, let me just be real clear with you. I was like, being a follower of Christ isn't about what you do; it's about who you know.
yeah.
And it's like,
That's
and
good.
being all in on Him, being all in on Jesus. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just what I was. And that's the way I got through it. I was like, so I would encourage you, I'm not telling you, it's not a command, it's not an order. I said, I would encourage you to be all in on Him, because that's what gets you through it. And so I got to go to this idea where Nehemiah is here when he finishes, and he's all in on what God's told him to do. He accomplishes it in 52 days. He turns back, he gives glory to Him, and folks can see that and attribute it to the work and the accomplishment that they had. They attribute it to Jesus. And so that was this week, dude. That was
Yeah,
just this week reading to Nehemiah. Now that doesn't even include where I was in I think I was in Corinthians, and some of the questions Paul was answering, which I always love reading those questions and reading his answer to those questions. And if you don't you've never read, First Corinthians, I encourage you to go do that. They're pretty. It's interesting. But yeah, so that's kind of where I was. It's those three things. A good vision, like you said, starts with understanding the condition,
Yeah.
knowing what good looks like, accepting the help, move on, don't fight the wrong battles, and
Yeah.
respond to opposition by staying focused on God and what He called you to do, and give
Yeah.
Him the glory.
Yeah. So little couple of nuggets that I put together there is you got
Yeah,
to resist. I'm sorry, you've got to reject the resistance to go the distance. You got to reject you're gonna have resistance. The enemy is never gonna to see you doing what God called you to do, what God's designed you to do. Because why? He knows that God's going to get the glory. There's going to be resistance. You must reject the resistance if you're going to go the distance. And then you've got to give credit to the God who did it. All right, give credit to the God who did it, because you can look at yourself and give yourself all the praise and all the glory you want. The reality is, um, that you're stealing what doesn't belong to you. But if you
amen.
continue to give credit to the one who did it, then the God who did it will do it again. If you continue to give him the glory that belongs to him. So,
Amen. I love it, man.